Hi, well, I'm Tom from AZTEC Protocol. I don't know how many of you have heard about us, but we're a small company working in London. I thought I could have given a kind of high-level talk about the importance of privacy, but I think increasingly people are aware of the importance of privacy in blockchain. I thought instead I would try to make some of the maths that is buried inside the AZTEC crypto system somewhat human readable. I think in particular it's very important for developers that they can understand, at least intuitively, what's going on inside AZTEC. So by way of a bit of background, our company has been alive for about a year and a half. I've actually been working with my co-founder Zach for 2 years, and we started off trying to build a credit platform. Now, we wanted certain features out of that platform. We wanted to be able to essentially use Ethereum as a programmable clearinghouse for loans. And the reason we were targeting loans for relatively obvious reasons, which is that they tend to trade in very high notionals, and the ordinal number of transactions is very, very low. So Ethereum presented an opportunity for us to provide this industry with a clearinghouse without a balance sheet. So we began December 2017 on the Entrepreneur First Accelerator in the Biscuit Factory in London. We then moved to the stables near King's Cross as part of the Balderton launch program. By this point, Zach, my co-founder, had spent some time looking into elliptic curve cryptography. And he began to realize that the crypto systems that we were looking at were relatively gas expensive, and wondered whether there was a way to make this more efficient. I managed to find a way to do this that addressed a narrower class of transactions than, for example, a snark or a stark. So by treating a narrower class of transactions, we could do all the things you'd want to do on a blockchain, but we could do it in a much more gas-efficient manner. But it took us a while to get that proof out, by which point we had closed a round with Consensus. Consensus are currently our lead investor. And we are now working in the Consensus headquarters in London. So Zach's background, he was a particle physicist by background. He did neutrino physics, spent time at the CERN accelerator. And he developed AZTEC more or less this time last year. And I also have a background in maths and was spent some time in the capital markets as well. So this is what we built. If there is anyone from the capital markets in the audience and thinks that this looks like a Slack for the capital markets they would want to use, please come and see me, because regrettably this is collecting dust. I love this platform, and very sadly we can't address this particular problem now that we're focused on privacy technology. But this is what we were originally building in order to turn front office of the capital markets into back office. So what is AZTEC? Well, as you may be aware, it's a privacy system. We have constructed it in a relatively different way to other zero-knowledge systems. We're really trying to present this as a Lego kit for developers. So the idea being, we give you a basket of functions, of zero-knowledge private functions, which you can compose to build a custom asset of your choosing. So this is really designed to make it very easy for people developing without knowing anything about cryptography to be able to build custom assets in an easy way. It's very gas efficient. Now, by very, I mean we're at around 800,000 to 900,000 gas today. There is, as some of you may be aware, an EIP in the works, EIP 1108, which would reduce the cost of elliptic curve pairings. Now, there have been some reasons why there's been some doubt as to whether that will be included in future hard forks. Not least that there were some libraries until recently which were quite computationally intensive to compute these pairings. My co-founder Zach actually has managed to patch one of those libraries and increase its efficiency by a factor of 2 times, and this should somewhat reduce the barriers to EIP 1108 being introduced. But I know that the EIP 1108 is not just important for us, it's important for a lot of people, and so we're very keen that that should be included in the next hard fork, so our fingers are firmly crossed on that. So the 5 proofs, these functions, this basket of atomic functions that we are providing, the first 5 are under audit at the moment, ready for our Q3 launch. You've got the send, You've got the swap, in other words, to use Ethereum as a clearinghouse. You've got an income proof, which is really important for the capital markets. This allows you to do things like pay interest on a bond or a loan, to pay out dividends, all done in zero knowledge. And it's done, of course, proportionate to the amount of the assets that you hold. We actually have, and I'll show you this a little bit later, we built a first sample DApp so that it's relatively clear how you can use AZTEC in your own digital assets, where we've managed to stream income out of a loan asset. So that's quite interesting because in the secondary markets today, for example, you might have a bond trading, and you will trade that bond dirty because there'll be a period where it's paid its interest maybe a month or 2 months ago, and it's got maybe a month or 2 months left to pay, and so you'll have to do a true-up with your counterparty. The nice thing about this is you can just call down that interest like a bank account on the secondary trade. So it introduces some efficiencies for example, capital markets use cases. And then, of course, we've got the most obvious things you would want, which is a mint and a burn proof. We've issued our own token standards. We got into terrible trouble for trying to call this a ZK ERC20, so I won't be doing that again. But it's the ERC 1724. This is the interface, and all this stuff, by the way, is available publicly on our GitHub. So I'm going to whistle through that. OK, maths for humans. Our friend Rick Burton likes to call out an alien every 6 to 12 months, and he thinks in Zach he may have cracked open the spaceship. What I do want to say is that I'm going to try to bridge the gap between the really tricky maths going on inside the AZTEC system and kind of intuition. There's a little thermometer at the top right. When you see that get hot, if you have a real allergy to maths, please do feel free to flick onto phones and things, but I'll try to make this as painless as possible. So under the hood, AZTEC is a join-split transaction. We have a concept of notes. So you have, let's say, your 25 ZK DAI. And as you may have heard, DAI was the first zero-knowledge sleeve that we applied to an asset. And you go and spend this by converting it into two output notes, one of 16 ZK DAI, which I might want to send to you, and 9 ZK DAI that I want to retain. So this is the first bit where we won't be going deeply into the maths. I just want to give you a flavor of what's going on. People talk a lot about homomorphic encryption. And I just want to make it really clear to everyone what this means. It really means being able to add numbers together, plain view numbers together, encrypt them. And then if I were to add them in plain view, in other words, let's suppose I have $10 of an asset, I want to send you 7, keep 3 out of the balance. I can check that sum in plain view, but if I want Ethereum to execute those with privacy, I need my crypto system to be able to have a concept of addition. I need my encrypted 7 and my encrypted 3 to be testably equal to my encrypted 10. So the question is, on the left-hand side, you've got this thing Z. Z just means the numbers that we all know and love, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. On the right-hand side, we need to find this thing G, this weird world of numbers. Now, actually, this weird world of numbers is used a lot in Ethereum. It is an elliptic curve group. What do we want out of this, this world of numbers? Well, first of all, we want computation. We want addition to be pretty easy to do. And we do this by sort of somewhat bounding the size of the numbers inside this crypto system. On the other hand, we want a very big forest of numbers. We want to make sure that when we go through a trail of adding numbers together, it's very, very easy to lose anyone who might be trying to attack, trying to find out where we came from. And we want no metrics. With the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I have sort of some guide, because I know when numbers are quite close together and when they're not. So I want to really sort of lose people. So the structure that's used is an elliptic curve group. Addition is defined in the following way. I take a point on the curve, A. I take another point on the curve, B. And to add them together, I simply look at the other intersect. I draw a straight line through them. And I take the reflection. That's just to make sure that I don't get stuck in the same 3 points. And then I go and make this really complicated. You can see this on the figure on the right. I reduce it over a finite field. And this collapses this weird world of numbers into an even weirder world of numbers, which is a kind of a speckly graph of things. Now, all those blue points on the right-hand side, you can add them together, and you will create another point, another number inside this strange world. But looking at a given number, it's very hard to work out how you can go backwards to a starting number without making an infeasible number of attempts. That's really the point of this. Now, there's a problem. So this is, it's homomorphic. I can take encrypted number A, encrypted number B, and add it together and create encrypted number C. There is a trouble. There's an attack on this, which is if I put in the number -1. Now, you may have seen, if I go back to that first slide, that's a finite group of numbers. And it means that once I add far enough, eventually I get back to where I started. This means that the number 1 is actually a very, very big number indeed. In our system, it's around 2 to the 254. It's a huge number. And so we've got to find a way to stop an attacker printing from, let's say, the 2 ZK. Let's say I'm trying to spend my 2 ZK die. I could be fair, and I could send you 1 and keep 1. But if instead I try to send you 3 and print -1, that -1 is an enormous number. I've just printed more ZK die or debt or equity, whatever it may be, than the number of atoms in the universe or that kind of order. So this is a real problem. So what we do is we constrain the size of the number that you can produce. That's the trick. We're just going to cut this off. Let's say we take 2 to the 30. We're just going to cut this off and say, sorry, if you print a really big number, you're not having it. We're going to reject it. And the question is, and by the way, the next 3 slides are bad, and then I promise you, there's 4 slides are bad, and then I promise you there'll be less maths after this. So we actually do what's known as a set membership proof. We take a very large range, and we encrypt the numbers in that range in order to make sure that you can prove that the assets you're creating are constrained by that range. If they are, you now can't do your pernicious -1 attack and print more debt or cryptocurrency or whatever it might be than the atoms in the universe. So we lock all these numbers into boxes. We do this using a Bonoboyan signature. If anyone wants to come and ask me about this at the end, please do, but I'm going to slightly whistle through it. And inside here is a little fingerprint, which we'll see later on, this number Y. This number Y, we're going to see surface in about two slides' time. We also have one magical function. And what this is able to do is to determine whether, for example, that number Y is buried inside a point in this elliptic curve. So it's not able to say this is what the number is, but if the same number is bedded into 2 elliptic curve points, this magical elliptic curve pairing, which governs, by the way, so much of Ethereum, so much of cryptography, is able to tell you if the same divisor is inside, the same little mathematical fingerprint is hidden inside these numbers. And then we go and publish the encrypted form of that fingerprint. Okay, so to make an AZTEC note, this is what an AZTEC note really is. Don't worry too much about the details. We have a notion A of a viewing key. This is the thing that will ultimately allow you to decrypt your AZTEC asset. So I should say, by the way, when you have an AZTEC asset, you have a spending key, which is your private key. And you also have a viewing key, because these are zero-knowledge assets. You need a way to decrypt them. That's this number A here. So I pick my number K off the shelf. Let's suppose I'm trying to spend $10 or $15 or $20. I'm going to put $10 or $15 or $20 into this number mu, which, again, we can run through in the end. And then I make an AZTEC commitment. And I don't know how many mathematicians are there in the room? Great. OK. I can get away with anything at this point. OK, so I've got here, did you spot it? You probably didn't spot it. OK, let's whistle through this a bit. So what I'm going to do is unwrap these symbols. And that little fingerprint, I know the effect of this is underwhelming, but just bear with me. That little fingerprint is there in the AZTEC note. And it's testable. And we're able to use that elliptic curve pairing trick to test whether that fingerprint is in the note that you have produced. Sorry, there it is. I was about to run through the full verifier and prover algorithms. I'll spare you that. If you want to talk through it at the end, please do let me know. That's the end of the maths, I'm thrilled to say. Yes. What can you build with AZTEC? Maybe this is a little bit more interesting if you're not a mathematician. Well, we thought we have a bit of a problem here because ZK technology is a sort of slightly, I think, mystical thing for most developers. And we wanted to give people a really concrete idea of how you might use this as part of our dev tools. Our dev tools, by the way, are about to get an upgrade. They're sort of semi-poor at the moment and about to become very good in the next 2 weeks. So AZTEC will be very, very accessible to you in the next fortnight. So, for example, we built and again, in the same way that I say ZK ERC20 and get shot down for it, ZK Dharma. So here we have built a loan DApp, which allows you to submit to the world for a loan, say, I want to take out some borrowings. In this particular case, we got a loan of 10,000 DAI. It's going to have an interest rate of 5%. And I give it an interest period and work out how much it's going to accrue. And then the magic here is that someone can come in and say, well, look, I know broadly what the terms are. Now I want some visibility on how much is available. I want some of the numbers under the hood. So you go in and you request to view that loan. And if the person on the other side says, yes, I'm happy with this, you can then see what the terms of the loan are because they will wire you the viewing keys. So you'll be able to decrypt what's going on. And this loan is pretty amazing in a number of ways. First of all, it is settled completely in zero knowledge. So the transfer of the 10,000 DAI and the transfer of the note saying, I owe you 10,000 DAI is done in a completely encrypted fashion. No one can tell from the very creation of that loan how much is inside that loan. It's completely invisible. The second thing is it has a concept of accruing interest. So we actually have an interest streaming function. One of our engineers, Paul Berg, was the creator of ERC 1620 in a former life. And he had this great idea that it is possible to stream interest without paying over a little bit of interest every single block. And the way you can do this is to say, OK, you, the borrower, keep a collateral account, some DAI on deposit, which has to be in excess of the amount of interest that is gradually accruing on the loan. If you fail to do that, you're in default. But as long as you do that, I, as the lender to you, can decide, right, OK, at some point, I'm not going to wait for the end of the quarter. I'm going to just withdraw, like a bank account, the interest sitting inside that collateral account, which is going to make for very efficient markets, particularly when we're doing secondary debt and secondary all kinds of assets, maybe even secondary staking or secondary, I don't know. That might be a bit difficult for various reasons. But for the future financial system, this is going to be a very important feature. So what else can you build? Well, that's slightly over to you. It's possible to use, for example, our AZTEC Range Proofs to, for example, take your passport, digitize it, in particular, let's say your date of birth. And if you then want to say, OK, I want to prove to a third party that I'm over 18, over 21, or that I'm within a bracket of another age, but I don't want them to get hold of my date of birth because it's quite an important identifier for me, I can submit a range proof to say, I am an age in this bracket. And that's a very powerful thing when we're thinking about self-sovereign identity. And I'm sure we've all done it, by the way, logged on to crypto trading systems, for example, and handed over our passport and thought, well, where's that going to end up? And how much at risk am I of losing grasp of my identity? Well, this is a very effective way to be able to make those attestations, make those proofs, but not hand over your identity. ZK DAI, so obviously payment systems, I think here are pretty compelling. And other things like, let's say you wanted to take out a mortgage on Ethereum. Let's sort of fast forward to the future, 10, 15, 20 years, who knows. And you want to be able to prove, for example, that your salary was in a particular bracket, that it was over a certain amount. I don't want you to know that everything that's going to my account. This is a publicly visible account. And it's got a number of transactions going into it, which is your salary. But I do want to be able to prove it's over a certain amount to be able to take out a mortgage, for example. This, again, is something you can do, and by the way, you will be able to do on our Q3 launch date with AZTEC. So there are many applications. Please do make sure you get in touch with us and ask us if you're working on a project where this may be useful. So come and visit our repo. We've got the white paper on there. If you're brave enough to pour through the maths paper. One of the great virtues I should say about AZTEC, and I should have actually said this at the outset, is that it is, despite what you may have just seen, a very simple cryptographic system. I mean, we've seen other crypto systems recently go through issues where they found problems in the logic, which is always a worry with a system of cryptography. The wonderful, and by the way, brilliantly patched, I should say, by the Zcash team, the Zcash team, sorry. But in the case of AZTEC, the simplicity of our proof should be of enormous appeal to us all, because it means that it can be very easily digested by most cryptographers in a relatively short space of time. We can write the entire proof in less than a page. And that's a very appealing feature of AZTEC, along with its efficiency. So please get in touch with one of our engineers. Their details are up there. Arno is our tech lead. Paul's a blockchain engineer, and Tom's a very junior blockchain engineer who's just joined us. Yeah, please do get in touch with any of those three. And they're really good at kind of helping you build dApps. They've done a lot of work at, for example, at hackathons and that sort of thing, and they'll certainly help you implement our systems. So we have a Discord channel. We have, obviously, our Twitter account, so please do follow us on there. My details are on the right, and again, please feel free to contact me directly. I think, more or less, that's it. And I might open up to any questions, and I do apologize if the maths was a little heavy, but I hope we whistled through that fast enough. Thanks.